Hello everybody, welcome to the first Google Hangout of the Hangout series, Am I Innovating Properly? This is the series of Google Hangouts that we've got planned in the lead up to the Chief Innovation Officer Summit that's taking place in New York. We will be bringing together all the speakers to participate in the Hangouts to discuss all things innovation. Everyone thinks they have the right innovation strategy. Everyone thinks they're the best innovators. But really, you have to ask yourself one question. Am I innovating properly? And after getting insight from the speakers who will be sitting down with and talking with, you will be asking yourself that question for sure. So today we're joined by a very special guest, Scott Bailey, who's the Managing Director of MassChallenge, their flagship program in Boston. Scott, welcome.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me today. Looking forward to it.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And Scott will be speaking at this year's Chief Innovation Officer Summit. So it's great to get you here for the viewers. So Scott, to start off, just give a little bit of background to the potential viewers and the attendees as well about how you got started in your career.
Well, I went to college at the University of Vermont. Got really excited about startups and entrepreneurship. Ended up running the entrepreneurship club in the school's first ever business plan competition. So I knew I loved ideas and passionate people. One of the things I learned though coming out of it was that entrepreneurs lacked access to a lot of key resources. And so I really knew I wanted to be a part of something where we could be a hub for those resources and help attract even more, and then also deploy them to entrepreneurs that needed it. So I thought the first thing I'd do is venture capital. But what I realized was, as a venture capitalist, you have to say no a lot. And I was trying to think, this isn't scalable. We need something where you can deploy a lot of resources across a very broad network of activity. And that's where I found MassChallenge. So I started at 2010, just after the program launched. And I've held just about every role. And I think when you think about innovation, even in a growing startup like MassChallenge was when I first got started, I think it's important to always be humble and always be looking for new things and creating a culture and environment that really fosters good ideas. And whether that's a company like MassChallenge itself as an organization, or the hundreds of companies that we support through our competition and accelerators around the world, I think that's a really important thing to be thinking about.
Okay, excellent, yeah. So in terms of delivering innovation, organizations always talk about how they are innovating, how one organization is better than the other at innovating. But I think innovation is a word which is thrown around a lot, but is not actually delivered. I mean, what are the main challenges do you think organizations, both corporate and startups, face when actually delivering real innovation?
Well, I think we need to focus on entrepreneurs that are creating new value. We need people, you shouldn't be worried necessarily about what your competitors are doing, because you should believe that what you're doing is so unique and different. You can use competitors to benchmark, and I think that's great. But at the same time, you've got to be creating your own strategies, your own ideas on how to create new innovation and ideas, but also support innovation. So some of the differences that we see with the corporates that we work with is they want to do two things. They want to foster innovation internally, but also figure out how to identify and then inject external innovation back inwards. Startups, I think, represent a key part of that. So we have done a lot of research. We've been working with organizations for many years. How do you better connect great entrepreneurs with ideas that aren't, let's say, burdened with large corporate bureaucracy, timelines? They're lean, nimble, and can move quickly. How do they think about integrating in these corporations of the future where they specifically want access to these new people, technology, and ideas at an earlier stage of the company's life cycle? So I think that's a lot of the conversation you're going to continue to hear. I also think everyone's got a big idea, but the ability to execute is super rare. So how can we do a better job of finding great entrepreneurs with ideas that can execute and then matching them up with corporations? So I think there are some great synergies that can take place between both these types of groups.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you on that. So in terms of actual innovation strategies, what would you say if there was a sort of a model innovation strategy, a benchmark, or something to look up to, what would you say are the key ingredients of a successful innovation strategy?
I think it goes a lot to what are the organization's goals, and then what what does success look like? Because innovation could look really different. You could innovate on how to reduce costs. You can innovate on talent development. So when I kind of look across organizations that do it well as large corporates, they probably have an entire portfolio strategy around innovation. They've got a group that's dedicated to investments. They've got a team that's focusing on fostering internal innovation. They've got a platform or a team focused on both sourcing, supporting, and streamlining external innovations into their company. Then on top of it, I think there's kind of layers in between, which are how are they thinking about integrating customers into the future of their own business? How are they creating structural both incentives and opportunities for people in the company that can make a big change? And that's when I'm talking about big corporates. When we go to startups, that's a whole different story. I think it's how do you create an entire ecosystem where access to resources are streamlined, accessible, and inclusive, and how do you get all these organizations that support an entrepreneur in early stage thinking about bringing that company to scale? This is one of the reasons MassChallenge is structured the way we are. We're a nonprofit. We don't take equity from the startups that we support. We operate across industry verticals, even nonprofits, and we're global. So we've got 5 offices around the world. So we're thinking about how do you create ecosystems where you can globally connect great startups and entrepreneurs, but supposed to support them on a local level. So this is some of the things that we're thinking about as an organization, and we're helping large corporates think about that too.
Okay, excellent. Now back to the sort of startups. Obviously, I recently read a report which was done by an organization called CB Insights, and they discussed how funding is on the decline for early stage startups. Other than funding, what are some of the main challenges that early stage startups face? So from a funding perspective, it'd be great to get your insight on that.
I think there are a couple things happening. So first is the barriers to technology and starting a company have been never been lower. Honestly, you can get a company started very quickly. You can go to market way faster than you've ever been able to, outside of, let's say, clean tech and life sciences and healthcare and stuff like that, things that take a longer time and are more expensive. But honestly, for a lot of businesses, the accessibility to entering into a new market are extremely low. So what that means is you've got more companies competing for cash, which is good, but at the same time, there aren't enough seed stage investors to support all of these quality ideas that are trying to enter into the market and grow. So I think what we're seeing a lot at MassChallenge is people are coming up with new ways to grow their company. They're going customer revenue first, which is honestly a good idea. I think they're focused on new partnerships and alignment with maybe like someone like a big corporate. They're finding maybe government funding, or they're opening up the ways they think about building the business that aren't just typically, raise your Series A from institutional venture capitalists. So I think the way people are seeking funding and securing it to grow their company is definitely being changed and modified from what we've seen at MassChallenge. The other thing is, I think there probably is a bit of a shift towards later stage investment, because many of the traditional firms who were doing seed stage investing are now essentially in a position to do a lot more follow-on of their earlier investments. So their kind of focus has shifted as well. I'd be interested in a model where we can do more to proliferate investment and like flood the market essentially, so that there are more early stage seed deals getting going. In Boston, MassChallenge is one of the largest seed investors in the city, but we don't even take equity. We give out $1 million annually in grants, 50 and 100K prizes. But I think a lot of the companies that come through, they have to be really scrappy and think about raising that money in new ways. So I believe there is a challenge, but there are interesting opportunities that may come out of this where people will seek funding from non-traditional sources.
Okay, excellent. So you speak about Boston, and obviously you've got a very large sort of your MassChallenge is very influential in the sort of East Coast area of the US, as well as the US in general. The first time I heard about you guys actually was in the UK. You've got the accelerator in the UK as well. So whenever people think about startups, tech, innovation, the first place that comes to mind is San Francisco, Silicon Valley. But how do you think the startup scene, the sort of venture capital scene is evolving, and the overall tech scene is evolving on the East Coast of America? And how do you see it playing out for the future?
Great question. I think there's a few things that are really interesting about what's going on the East Coast, but also in entrepreneurial communities all over the world. So if I start on the East Coast, I think there are a few things that emerge as great opportunities. In Boston, we just launched a new digital healthcare program called Pulse at MassChallenge, focused on slightly later stage digital healthcare startups. Because if you look at Boston, this is something that the city and the region is really good at. Highest concentration of hospitals, new venture funding dedicated to digital health. We've got partners, we've got large payers, we've got an amazing source of talented people, patients, physicians, all this stuff that want to start doing new things in technology. So I think I'm really excited about that. Boston's also really good at B2B. They're good at robotics. They're good at, I'd say, a lot of like hard technologies and material sciences and things like that, electronics. So I think you'll see more of that come out of Boston. If you look at New York, it's media capital, fintech capital. I think we're going to see more and more evolve there. You've got the research triangle in North Carolina doing amazing work. I think Atlanta is emerging as kind of an interesting opportunity. I've got a friend who's running a program in Miami as well. So I think the entire East Coast is really starting to jump on these opportunities to support the broader entrepreneurial ecosystems and the startups within them. I think if I look around the world, there are a lot of people who are trying to create the Silicon Valley of their own place. And I sometimes just wish they'd come up with their own names, because I think each region has something really unique to contribute. And I understand the aspirational, the motive to want to be like Silicon Valley, but at the same time, as we've launched offices around the world, I think it's really exciting to see those regions emerge within their own category. What we've seen is when you're growing a startup, you built it because of the local regional elements that are likely to make you successful, whether you have customers there, mentors, investors. And so what I think is going to be the new emerging idea out of entrepreneurial communities is creating really strong local and regional ecosystems of support, but finding a way to do a better job of plugging those startups in to global regions, other global regions. So MassChallenge, our key strategy right now, is to connect our hubs so that entrepreneurs have access across the system. And it's not just about what you're doing in California, but it's about having a much broader and larger global view of how you can impact the entire world.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's excellent. So you mentioned briefly there you recently launched the digital health innovation opportunity in Pulse MassChallenge. I mean, in terms of particular industries, in terms of particular technology at the moment, from your perspective, what would you invest in from a perspective of what you think will be most revolutionary and most profitable? What area would you invest in? Would it be the digital health care side of things?
So, MassChallenge doesn't make investments, but we give out awards, and I don't pick, but I help facilitate, the community's selection of those ideas. I can tell you there's some really exciting opportunities in digital health. When you just look at access to things like data, if we can make better decisions and outcomes for patients based on better access and kind of proliferation of data in several ways, we can really help change things like diabetes and come up with better patient-centered solutions. So I think there are some really interesting large health challenges that we're about to start facing over the next few years, and I think digital health could play a role. I think in Boston, I get excited about things like IoT. I could imagine things as simple as making it easier for to go to the doctor, or prevent you, from having to go to the doctor as frequently. So preventative medicine is something that I think a lot of people are looking at. How can you not just prescribe pills, but create better lifestyles and healthy kind of wellness programs, I think will emerge as well. Then there's all kinds of things. Can you design better drugs if you have better data on the patients that you're trying to help? And I think there's a seriously large range of opportunities to be tackled in healthcare, just from a regulatory standpoint. If we can help create better access to entrepreneurs that want to be connected to resources, I think that's huge. Just because of the complications in healthcare, starting out a digital health company is extremely difficult, and it takes just so much time and money to get it off the ground, and you have to have the right connections, the right team. And so if we think starting a regular company is hard, starting a digital health company is even harder, just because of the barriers that are there. So at Pulse and MassChallenge, we're really focused on reducing those barriers, making meaningful connections and matches to people in healthcare. Someone like, if you've got a company focused on elder care, how do we put you in touch with the head of innovation for AARP so that we can make meaningful change in that world? And can you do customer pilots? Can you get access to mentors who have specific insights on the industry? Can you get access to their customers? All of this kind of stuff we can try and start to unlock through programs like Pulse at MassChallenge.
Excellent. Finally, one of the biggest stories in terms of the tech startup scene last year was the collapse of the unicorn Theranos. I mean, a lot of companies are choosing to stay private. They're not going towards IPO. I mean, what would your advice be for a company that manages to grow so big, but then what lessons can be learned from that particular example?
That's an interesting question. I think like something I've learned a lot at MassChallenge, and maybe it's part of our mission, but I think building companies sustainably and responsibly is really important. And at MassChallenge, we talk a lot about creating cultures of openness and transparency. And I think it shouldn't all be about short-term greed and profit, and we should be focused on creating sustained long-term impact that really helps the world. And that's a lot related to our mission at MassChallenge. But I just say, it's one thing to raise a lot of money and build a big company, but if you do it in a way that's not sustainable or not necessarily perfectly aligned to what you're trying to accomplish, it's much harder. And so I think I just encourage people to have a kind of value around creating value for others before you extract it. And so I think if you focus on that and you focus on transparency, collaboration, and long term, you're much more likely to have a stronger company.
Excellent. And you mentioned collaboration there. I just want to finish off by asking one final question, and okay. I think it's probably the most important thing that organizations, no matter what you are, corporate or tech, have to take into account when innovating, and it's collaboration. So the collaborations we're seeing between universities and startups, between corporates and universities for research. How important is collaborations and partnerships in driving innovation overall? So creating an ecosystem of innovation overall.
It's core to our model. That's literally the MassChallenge model, because we believe that basically independently each organization or stakeholder in the community is focused on their own business, right? A school, they're focused on educating students and putting out research and growing, but then those students graduate, and where do they go? And investors are saying, hey, I need more pipeline, I need more companies, each independently aren't able to solve the system-wide issue, which is kind of facilitated access and connection. And that's where MassChallenge comes in. We want to be the kind of entity that helps bring together many different stakeholders that should be working together and create an efficient model and process for them to engage and connect and build relationships with early stage but high growth startups. And we think that's critical. And I believe partnering up will be the future of what we see in business. It's no longer about just like building a product and growing as an individual company throughout your life cycle. I think because it's so much easier to work across organizations and people, I think we'll see much more partnerships and collaborations between organizations, which is really exciting.
Excellent. And I believe you at MassChallenge, the team at MassChallenge, you collaborated with Imagintic, and you conducted a study about the impact of startup corporate collaboration. What did you find from that study? What were some of the key findings?
I think it's a combination of things, but I'd say most importantly, almost every organization we surveyed said that having access to startups or the startup community was a key part of their strategy over the next 5 years. And figuring out a way to create meaningful connections and pipelines to innovation was a key part of their strategy. So I think this is a priority for large companies, and many of them are trying to figure out how to align the company's goals and kind of internal systems to make sure that they're facilitating these external ideas internally. Two, I think another big thing is even within the company, how do you foster and develop an internal talent pipeline of great ideas, people, and technology. And so I think that this kind of in between of how do we partner with companies externally, but how do we also think about building companies internally is another thing that I took away from the study. And having worked with heads of innovation across Fortune 100 for the last 6 years, this definitely rings true. I also think the way people are thinking about engaging with startups is changing. It's not just about directly investing. It could be about getting talent. It could be about putting the company in new communities or places that they've never seen. The number one reason GE just moved to Boston was because they wanted to be around the heart of innovation. Jeff Immelt was recently quoted as saying, when we worked in Connecticut, you could look out and yeah, it was beautiful. There's trees and nature and everything else. But when you're in Boston, you get nervous because there's so many people working on amazing things. And it just puts you in a mindset where you're like, I've got to move a little bit faster. I've got to innovate better. It just puts you on your toes in a way that you wouldn't get in other places. And I think it's really important for companies to just be close or connected to the heart of innovation in their own communities.
Excellent. So basically it makes you actually question yourself whether, am I innovating properly?
Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you very much, Scott. You've given us some great insight. Viewers, if you would like to hear Scott speaking in the flesh, please join us on December the 5th and 6th at the Chief Innovation Officer Summit in New York, where Scott will be participating as a speaker. Also, we have the president of MassChallenge, Mike Lorette. He will be going into greater detail about the study that we have just discussed. Any final message for the viewer, Scott?
No, if you're interested in getting involved with the entrepreneurial community and you want to get involved with MassChallenge, just go to masschallenge.org and let us know.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Scott, and I look forward to seeing you in December.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it as well. Bye.
Bye.